I'm Andrew. I'm 33 years old, and 10 years ago my own brother framed me for a disgusting crime to cover up his own, forcing me to take a plea deal that ruined my life. Before I tell you about the text messages that finally brought the truth to light, do me a favor and let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. It's always incredible to see how far these stories can reach. Okay, so it all started on a Tuesday, a completely ordinary Tuesday. The air in my small apartment smelled like solder and old coffee, the way it always does. I was hunched over a vintage amplifier, the kind with glowing vacuum tubes, trying to trace a buzzing sound that had driven its owner crazy. This is my world now. Wires, circuits, the quiet logic of machines. Machines don't lie. That's when my phone buzzed on the workbench. It wasn't a call. It was an email. The sender's name was just Isabella. I didn't know any Isabella, but it was the subject line that made the world stop. It just said, "The truth about Leo. Leo, my brother, the golden boy." The name itself felt like a ghost in my apartment, a word I hadn't spoken out loud in years. My heart started that familiar, heavy thud against my ribs, a drumbeat of old trauma. For a decade, I had built a life on the ashes of the one he burned down. I had rules. No contact, no questions, no looking back. And now the email was short. It said she was his fiancée, that they had a son, and that she had found things that didn't add up. Attached were 2 files. One was an audio recording. The other was a PDF file, password protected. My hand hovered over the screen, shaking. Part of me, the part that had learned to survive, screamed to just delete it, to throw the phone against the wall and get back to the safety of my amplifier. What good could come from digging up a grave? But another part of me, a part one thought had died a long time ago, felt a flicker of something. Not hope. It was too early for hope. It was just a question. And that question pulled me back 10 years. Back to a courtroom that smelled of old paper and stale justice. I wasn't in my workshop. I was 23, wearing a suit that was too big for me, standing before a judge. I can still see his face, bored and impatient. He wasn't looking at me, he was looking at a file. My life reduced to a file. He read the sentence. 5 years probation. Lifetime registration as a sex offender. The words didn't even feel real. They were just sounds in a room. I remember turning my head, just for a second, and looking at my family. My mother, Helen, was crying into a tissue, her shoulders shaking. My father, Robert, stared straight ahead, his jaw set like stone, a mask of grim duty. And then there was Leo, my 16-year-old brother. He wouldn't look at me. He just stared at his hands, the perfect picture of a shattered victim. The lie was complete. The gavel came down, and the sound echoed in the silent room. That echo, it never really stopped. It followed me out of that courtroom and into the broken life that was waiting for me. I didn't know it then, but the truth was already buried, waiting for a stranger to come along with a shovel. To understand how it all went so wrong, you have to understand my family's solar system. And in our house, my brother Leo was the sun. I was maybe a distant, forgotten moon. For years older, but always in his shadow. Leo was brilliant. Straight A's, captain of the debate team, the kind of kid who teachers loved and parents bragged about. He had this easy charm that could talk anyone into anything. Our parents, Robert and Helen, orbited him constantly. His achievements were announced at dinner parties. His trophies lined the mantelpiece. His future was the family's favorite topic. They were saving for his college fund like it was a sacred duty. My world was the basement. Down there it was cool and quiet. It smelled of dust and ozone. It was my sanctuary, filled with dissected radios, old computer towers, and tangled nests of wires. I wasn't good at school. The abstract world of textbooks just didn't click for me. But if you gave me something broken, something with a circuit board and a power source, I could make it work. I could understand it. It made sense in a way that people didn't. Leo used to come down sometimes, back when we were younger. He'd watch me work, his eyes wide with a flicker of genuine curiosity. But as we got older, that changed. The basement became Andrew's weird hobby. It was the place he didn't bring his popular friends. To our parents, it was a source of mild embarrassment. "I don't know what we're going to do with him," I'd hear my father mutter to my mother late at night. "Leo's got his path set. Andrew, he just plays with junk." I remember one night vividly. I was 18. I had just spent a week building a custom sound system for my beat-up car, soldering every connection myself. I was proud. I brought it up to show them during dinner. I barely got a sentence out before my dad cut me off. "That's nice, Andrew. Leo, tell your mother what Mr. Henderson said about your history paper." And just like that, I was invisible again. Leo launched into a story about his teacher predicting he'd get into an Ivy League school. My mom beamed. My dad nodded with satisfaction. I just stood there for a moment, holding a speaker, feeling like a ghost in my own home. I didn't resent Leo, not really. How can you resent the sun? I just wished, for once, that someone would acknowledge my light, too, no matter how small it was. I quietly went back down to the basement. I didn't feel anger, just a quiet, hollow ache. The truth is, they had been setting the stage for Leo's lie for years. They had already decided who was valuable and who was disposable. I just hadn't realized it yet. The shift started when Leo turned 16. That easy charm of his started to harden around the edges. He started hanging out with a guy named Marcus. Marcus was a couple of years older, and he had that kind of swagger that screamed trouble. He drove a loud, rusty Camaro and always seemed to have a pack of cigarettes rolled into his t-shirt sleeve. He was the kind of guy my parents would have had a fit over, but Leo was smart. He never brought Marcus home. I started seeing things. Leo coming home late, smelling faintly of smoke. The scrape on the side of our family car that he claimed happened in the school parking lot. Small things, but they felt wrong. One afternoon, I was coming home from my part-time job at a local electronics shop. As I pulled onto our street, I saw them, Leo and Marcus, down the block, huddled by our neighbor Mr. Henderson's pristine vintage Mustang. Marcus was holding something, a Slim Jim, and Leo was looking around, nervous and excited at the same time. My stomach dropped. I pulled over and got out. "Leo, what the hell are you doing?" They both jumped. Marcus shot me a dirty look and muttered something to Leo. Leo's face, which had been pale with panic, immediately morphed into defiance. "Nothing," he snapped. "We're just looking at it." "God, can you not be so paranoid? Looking at it with a Slim Jim?" I said, my voice rising. "Get away from the car, Leo. Now." Marcus stepped forward. "Who do you think you are, man? His dad." "I'm his brother," I said, looking straight at Leo. "And he knows better than this." A flicker of something, shame, maybe, crossed Leo's face before it was replaced by that familiar, manipulative mask. He turned to Marcus. "Let's just go. He's going to ruin everything." Then he looked at me, his eyes cold. "You're just jealous. You've always been jealous that I have friends and a life." That night, I tried to talk to him. I cornered him in the hallway. "Leo, Marcus is bad news. You're going to get into real trouble." He just laughed. A bitter, ugly sound. "And you're my savior? The guy who lives in the basement? Don't worry about my life, Andrew. Worry about your own." He pushed past me and slammed his bedroom door. Later that night, I overheard him talking to our mom in the kitchen. His voice was soft, laced with fake tears. "I don't know what's wrong with Andrew," he said. "He's just so angry all the time. He cornered me in the hall tonight. He was screaming at me about my friends. It scared me, Mom." I heard my mother's comforting voice. "Oh, honey, don't you worry. I'll talk to your father. Your brother is just going through a phase." I stood at the top of the stairs, my blood running cold. He wasn't just lying, he was planting seeds. He was painting me as unstable, as angry, as a threat. He was building his alibi, and I was too naive to see it. The foundation of the nightmare was being laid, brick by manipulative brick. The night it happened was quiet. I was down in the basement, headphones on, meticulously replacing the capacitors on an old turntable. It was probably around midnight when I heard a faint thud from outside, but I dismissed it as a garbage can tipping over. I finished my work around 1 a.m., cleaned my station, and went upstairs to a silent house. I peeked into Leo's room. He was in bed, seemingly fast asleep. Everything seemed normal. The next morning, the neighborhood was buzzing. Mr. Henderson's classic Mustang, the one he spent every weekend polishing, was gone. Not just gone, but dragged out of his driveway, leaving deep gouges in the asphalt before disappearing. The police were there taking statements. I felt a knot of dread in my stomach. I knew who was involved. I just knew. I decided I had to talk to Leo before our parents got home from their weekly grocery run. I went to his room, but the door was locked. I knocked. "Leo, we need to talk." Silence. Then, a muffled, "Go away." "Leo, I know you and Marcus had something to do with Mr. Henderson's car. You have to tell Dad what happened." The door flew open. Leo's face was pale. His eyes were red-rimmed and frantic. "I don't know what you're talking about," he whispered, his voice trembling. "And you need to shut up. You need to shut your mouth right now." He looked terrified, but it was more than just fear of getting caught. It was something deeper, something colder. Before I could press him, we heard the crunch of tires in the driveway. Mom and Dad were home, but they weren't alone. A police car pulled in right behind them. My heart hammered against my ribs. This is it, I thought. They're here for Leo. But they didn't go for Leo. 2 police officers and a stern-looking woman in a blazer from Child Protective Services walked into our house. My parents looked confused and scared. The CPS woman, Ms. Albright, had a file in her hand and an expression that offered no comfort. "Mr. and Mrs. Miller?" she began, her voice devoid of emotion. "We're here to investigate a serious allegation made by your son, Leo." My dad, Robert, looked at Leo, who was now standing behind our mom, looking at the floor. "An allegation? What's going on?" Ms. Albright's eyes found me as I stood in the hallway, frozen. "Leo has disclosed a pattern of serious abuse. Andrew," she said, my name sounding like a verdict. "He's accused you of sexually assaulting him." The world tilted on its axis. The air left my lungs. I looked from the woman's cold face to my parents. My mother's hand flew to her mouth, a horrified gasp escaping. My father's face, a mask of confusion just seconds before, hardened into one of pure disgust as he looked at me, at his son. There was no question in his eyes, only condemnation. I looked at Leo. He was crying now, silent tears streaming down his face as he buried his head in our mother's shoulder. And through his fake sobs, he uttered the words that sealed my fate, the words that acted as the nuclear option he and Marcus had planned. "I'm sorry," he choked out, his voice muffled. I couldn't keep his secret anymore." The next few hours were a blur of cold, bureaucratic horror. They separated me from my family immediately. 2 officers took me down to the station, putting me in a small, windowless room that smelled of stale cigarettes and disinfectant. It was an interrogation room, just like on TV, but there was nothing entertaining about it. A detective, a heavy-set man named Rivers, sat across from me. He had a file open, but he barely looked at it. His eyes were locked on me, filled with a lazy, confident contempt. He thought he knew who I was. The town weirdo, the basement dweller, the freak. "So, Andrew," he started, leaning forward, "tell me about your hobbies." I tried to explain. "I fix things. Electronics. Old stereos. Computers." He smirked. "Ah, so you spend a lot of time alone? Down in the basement? Your brother says you'd lock the door." "For concentration," I said, my voice sounding weak even to my own ears. "You need a steady hand for soldering." "A steady hand," he repeated slowly, letting the words hang in the air, twisting them into something sinister. "He says you made him watch. He says you told him it was your special place, your secret world." Every innocent detail of my life was being taken, examined, and reassembled into a monstrous narrative. My passion for electronics became a creepy obsession. My need for quiet became secretive behavior. My introverted nature became a sign of a predator. They brought my parents in. My father wouldn't even look at me. He just spoke to the detective. He's always been different, quiet, kept to himself. We never knew what he was thinking. He wasn't defending me. He was confirming their story. He was contributing to the character assassination. My mother just cried. "My poor Leo," she kept saying. "My poor baby." They finally allowed for a supervised meeting with Leo. We sat on opposite sides of a table, with Ms. Albright from CPS sitting between us. Leo looked small and fragile. He had dark circles under his eyes, as if he hadn't slept. He looked like the perfect victim. I just stared at him, my mind reeling. The car, Marcus, all of it was gone. This was the only thing in the room now. This giant, suffocating lie. "Leo," I said, my voice cracking. "Why? Just tell me why." He flinched. He looked up, and for a single, fleeting second our eyes met. In that moment I saw it. I saw the terrified 16-year-old kid who had gotten in way over his head. I saw the flicker of guilt, of regret. But it was gone as quickly as it came, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. He had chosen his path. He had to see it through. He looked away, turning to Ms. Albright. "I can't do this," he whispered, his voice trembling. "He's trying to manipulate me, just like he always does." And that was it. The performance was flawless. The trap was sprung. I wasn't just being accused of a crime. I was being erased. The person I was, the brother he knew, was being methodically replaced by a monster of his own creation. And everyone, absolutely everyone, was buying it. The system chews you up fast. I was assigned a public defender, a tired, overworked man named Mr. Davies whose suit looked as exhausted as he did. We met in a small, beige office that smelled like paper and defeat. He spent about 10 minutes glancing through my file, his expression never changing. "This is bad," he said, not as a warning, but as a simple statement of fact, like commenting on the weather. He said, "She said cases are always a crapshoot. Except in your case it's he said. And one of the he's is a 16-year-old honor student, and the other is his reclusive older brother. Who do you think a jury's going to believe?" "But it's a lie," I insisted, my voice desperate. "He's covering for something. I think he and his friend stole a car." Mr. Davies waved a dismissive hand. "A stolen car? The DA isn't talking about a stolen car. They're talking about 20 years in prison, Andrew. 20 years. And after that, you're a registered sex offender for the rest of your life. You'll never get a decent job, never live in a decent neighborhood. Your life, as you know it, will be over." The words hit me like a physical blow. 20 years. I'd be 43 when I got out. My entire youth, my entire life gone. "The prosecutor has offered a deal," he continued, his tone flat. "It's called an Alford plea. You don't admit guilt, but you acknowledge that the state has enough evidence to likely convict you. You plead no contest. In exchange, they drop the felony charges. You get 5 years of probation and you still have to register. It's a terrible deal, but it's a hell of a lot better than 20 years. I felt sick. "So I have to say I did it?" "You have to say they can prove you did it," he corrected. "It's legal maneuvering. It's the best you're going to get." The final nail in the coffin came from my own father. He visited me at the county jail, speaking to me through a thick pane of glass on a crackling phone line. He looked older, grayer, but there was no sympathy in his eyes, only a cold, hard pragmatism. "I spoke to your lawyer," he said, his voice flat. "He told me about the deal." "Dad, you can't possibly believe him," I pleaded. "You know me." He looked away. "I know that your mother is a wreck. I know that your brother is going through something unimaginable. The thought of putting him on a witness stand, of making him relive this in front of a courtroom, it would destroy him. It would destroy this family." "What about me?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "What about destroying me?" He finally looked at me, his eyes like chips of ice. "Sometimes you have to make a sacrifice for the good of the family. A trial would be a circus. Our name, our reputation, everything we've worked for would be dragged through the mud. Think about Leo's future, his college fund, everything we've planned for him. He took a deep breath. Take the deal, Andrew. Don't put your sister, don't put your brother through a trial. Just take the deal. And that was it. It wasn't about truth. It was about image. It was about convenience. It was about protecting the sun and letting the moon drift off into the darkness. He wasn't asking me. He was telling me. My own father was ordering me to lay down my life to protect a lie. And in that moment, I realized I was truly, utterly alone. The bargain was made. My soul for his silence. My future for his comfort. Probation is a prison without walls. The day I walked out of the courthouse, a free man in theory, was the day my real sentence began. The first rule of my probation was that I couldn't live at home. I was a registered offender, a danger to a minor. The minor being my brother, the one who had put me there. The irony was a bitter pill I had to swallow every single day. I packed a duffel bag with clothes and my most essential tools and left the house I grew up in. My mother cried. My father gave me a thin envelope with a few $100s and a stiff, "Good luck." Leo was nowhere to be seen. The world shrinks fast when you have a record like mine. I tried to rent a room in a boarding house. The landlady was a sweet, grandmotherly type, until she ran my background check. Her smile vanished. "I'm sorry," she said, not meeting my eyes. "I have grandchildren who visit. I'm sure you understand." I understood perfectly. I was a monster now. Finding a job was even worse. I was a good technician, but no one cared. The box I had to check on every application was a death sentence. "Have you ever been convicted of a crime?" "Yes." And the interview would end. My salary prospects went from low to non-existent. For the first few months, I lived in my car. A 1998 Toyota Corolla with a bad alternator and rust creeping up the wheel wells. It was my home, my transportation, and my prison cell all in one. I'd park in 24-hour grocery store lots or on quiet industrial streets, trying to be invisible. I bought a cheap membership to a Planet Fitness so I could use the shower and pretend to be normal for an hour each day. Loneliness is a physical thing. It's a cold that settles deep in your bones. I tried dating once. I met a woman named Sarah at a coffee shop. She was kind and funny, and for a few weeks I felt almost human again. But the lie was always there, sitting in the back of my mind. I knew I had to tell her. I sat her down one night and stumbled through the story. I told her it wasn't true, that it was complicated. I watched her face as I spoke, saw the warmth in her eyes slowly curdle into fear and suspicion. She didn't say much. The next day she texted me. "I can't do this. I'm sorry." I never heard from her again. That was the night I hit rock bottom. I sat in my car, parked behind a deserted strip mall. The envelope from my dad long since empty. The weight of the last few months, of the injustice, of the utter hopelessness, came crashing down on me. For a fleeting, terrifying moment, I thought about just ending it, driving my car into a wall or just stopping. But then my eyes landed on the duffel bag in the passenger seat. My multimeter was sticking out of a side pocket. My soldering iron. My tools. The only things in the world that still made sense. The only things that were still mine. And I thought about that turntable I was fixing on the night it all went wrong. It was still in the basement, unfinished. The thought was small, but it was enough. It was a flicker of a pilot light in the darkness. I wasn't done yet. They had taken my name, my family, my future. But they couldn't take this. They couldn't take what was in my hands and in my head. I started the car, the engine rattling in protest, and drove. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I wasn't going to stop. For months, I scraped by on odd jobs for cash. Repairing broken vacuums, fixing lamps, anything people would pay me a few bucks for without asking for my last name. It was a meager existence, but I was surviving. My probation officer, a hard-ass named Davis, watched my every move. He'd show up unannounced at the cheap motel room I was finally able to afford, tossing the room, looking for any reason to violate me. He saw the label on my forehead and nothing else. One day, I was walking through a rundown industrial part of town when I saw it. A small, handwritten sign taped to the window of a dusty, cluttered electronics repair shop, "Help Wanted." The shop was called Chen's Electronics. It looked like it had been there since the dawn of time. I hesitated. I had been through this dozens of times. The hope, the forced smile, and then the inevitable rejection. But something pushed me forward. The worst they could do was say no. I was used to no. Inside, the shop was a wonderland of organized chaos. Shelves overflowed with schematics, components, and gadgets from every era. Behind the counter was a small, elderly Asian man with kind eyes and hands stained with a lifetime of work. This was Mr. Chun. I asked about the job. He looked me up and down, his gaze sharp. He asked me a few technical questions, things only a real technician would know. I answered them easily. He nodded, impressed. Then came the hard part. "There's something you should know," I said, my stomach twisting. "I have a record." I braced myself for the familiar change in his expression, the polite dismissal. But it didn't come. He just looked at me, his expression unreadable. I took a breath and told him everything. I didn't make excuses. I just laid out the facts. The accusation, the plea deal, the probation. I ended by saying, "It wasn't true, but that's what the paper says." He was silent for a long time, just studying my face. I thought he was going to tell me to leave. Instead, he picked up a broken radio from the counter. "The amplifier circuit on this is shot," he said, his voice raspy. "How would you fix it?" I blinked, thrown off. I looked at the radio, and my brain switched into its comfort zone. Well, I began. First I'd check the power transistor for a short. If that's good, I'd test the voltage on the filter capacitors. I talked for 5 minutes. When I finished, he just nodded slowly. "You start tomorrow," he said. 8 a.m. In this shop, I do not care what the paper says. I care if your hands can fix what is broken. Your hands seem to know the truth. I stood there, speechless. For the first time in years, someone had looked past the label. Someone had seen me. I felt a stinging in my eyes, and I had to look away so he wouldn't see. I just muttered, "Thank you." It was the most inadequate phrase I could imagine for the lifeline he had just thrown me. I didn't know it then, but that dusty little shop would become my home, and that quiet, wise man would become the father I never really had. 10 years is a long time, long enough to build a new life or at least a convincing imitation of one. My 5 years of probation had ended. My PO, Davis, had looked almost disappointed on our last meeting, as if he'd been hoping I would fail. But I hadn't. I never left Chen's Electronics. When Mr. Chun retired, he sold the shop to me for a price that was frankly a gift. I was now Andrew Miller, small business owner. I had my own apartment, a real one with a lease in my name. I had a routine. I had peace. But it was a fragile peace, built on a foundation of silence and solitude. The shadow of my past was always there. Permanent roommate. That's why the email from Isabella felt like a wrecking ball. After my hands stopped shaking, I went back to it. I opened the email again on my laptop, the bigger screen making it feel more real, more dangerous. "My name is Isabella Rossi," it read. "I am Leo Miller's fiancée. We have a 5-year-old son, Liam. I'm writing to you because I believe a terrible injustice was done a long time ago." My breath hitched. She went on to explain. She'd known Leo for 6 years. He had told her about his past, about his troubled older brother. He had painted the same monstrous picture for her that he had for everyone else. And she had believed him. But then they had Liam. And as their son grew, she started to see things. She saw how easily Leo could lie, how he could twist situations to make himself the victim and little Liam the aggressor. He'd manipulate their son over small things. A broken toy, a spilled drink, with a skill that she found deeply unsettling. "It was a pale echo of the story he'd told her about you," she wrote. It made her skin crawl. The doubts started as a whisper and grew into a roar. She started digging, quietly at first. She looked through old yearbooks, online records. She found out about Marcus, about his own history of juvenile offenses. She learned about Mr. Henderson's stolen car, an incident that was reported the very same day Leo made his accusation. A coincidence that was too big to ignore. That's when she decided to hire a private investigator, an ex-cop named Peterson. He had been digging for 2 months. He found something, Andrew, she wrote. Something concrete. I can't say more in an email, but I need to meet you. I know this is asking the impossible. I know we are strangers, and I am connected to the person who hurt you more than anyone. But the truth matters. It has to. Below her signature was the password for the encrypted PDF file. My fingers trembled as I typed it in. The file opened. It was a preliminary report from the PI. Scanned documents, timelines, interviews, and at the very end, a short paragraph. Preliminary forensics on a recovered electronic device have yielded promising results. We have successfully retrieved a series of fragmented text messages from the relevant time period. Full restoration is pending. Text messages. My heart felt like it was going to beat out of my chest. I stared at the screen, at the clinical, detached language that held the key to my stolen life. 10 years of silence, and the past wasn't just echoing. It was screaming, and for the first time, I felt a terrifying, dangerous thing stirring within me. Hope. We met at a quiet, out-of-the-way diner halfway between my city and hers. The kind of place with vinyl booths and coffee that's been on the burner a little too long. I got there early, picking a booth in the back corner where I could watch the door. I felt like a spy in my own life story. Isabella arrived right on time. She was sharp, elegant, with eyes that were both intelligent and exhausted. She looked like a woman who hadn't been sleeping well for a long time. With her was an older man with the quiet, observant demeanor of a cop. This had to be Peterson, the PI. The introductions were awkward. A handshake felt too formal, but what else was there? We were three strangers bound together by a decade-old lie. Andrew, Isabella began, her voice soft but steady. Thank you for coming. I can't imagine how difficult this is. I just nodded, unable to form words yet. Peterson got straight to the point. He slid a folder across the table. It was thicker than the one she had sent me. What your brother did, he said, his voice a low gravel, was planned. It wasn't some panicked lie a kid tells. It was a calculated conspiracy to obstruct justice for a different crime. He laid it all out. He had tracked down Marcus, Leo's old friend. Marcus was now a mechanic in another state, trying to keep his head down. At first, he denied everything. But Peterson was persistent. He showed Marcus proof that he was looking into the stolen car, that the statute of limitations hadn't run out on certain related offenses. He applied pressure. And Marcus, seeing his own comfortable life on the line, finally broke. It was Leo's idea, Peterson said, quoting Marcus. All of it. The story that Marcus told was uglier than I could have imagined. That night, they hadn't just planned to joyride in Mr. Henderson's Mustang. They were going to strip it for parts. But they were clumsy. They'd crashed it into a ditch at the edge of town while trying to get it to a hidden garage. Panicked, knowing the police would eventually trace it back to them, Leo had come up with what he called his nuclear option. He told Marcus that his weirdo brother would be the perfect scapegoat. Peterson continued, his eyes on me. He said, "No one will ever believe him over me." He had been laying the groundwork for weeks, complaining to your parents about how you were angry and creepy. I felt a wave of nausea. It was even worse than I thought. It wasn't just a lie to get out of trouble. It was a character assassination, a premeditated destruction of a human being. Marcus was scared, Peterson said. He didn't want to go along with it, but Leo convinced him it was the only way. Leo told him exactly what to say if the police questioned him. He said he saw me acting strangely around Leo, that he was worried for him. He corroborated the whole damn story. My hands were clenched into fists under the table, my knuckles white. I had spent 10 years thinking Leo was just a weak, scared kid. But he wasn't. He was a monster. A cold, calculating monster who had sacrificed his own brother without a second thought. "This is all good," I finally managed to say, my voice hoarse. But it's still his word against mine and Marcus's. A jury might think Marcus is just trying to save his own skin. Peterson leaned back, a grim, satisfied look on his face. That's what we thought too, which is why we kept digging. He tapped the folder. We found the murder weapon, so to speak. Marcus had kept his old phone from back then. A brick of a thing, thrown in a box of junk in his garage. He thought it was dead. But it wasn't. He opened the folder. Inside was a single, printed page. A forensic report. "We pulled the data off the SIM card," he said. "And we found the text messages." My eyes scanned the page. It was a transcript of a text message exchange between Leo and Marcus, dated the day after Mr. Henderson's car was stolen. The day my life ended. Reading it felt like watching a slow-motion car crash. "Leo, he's at the station. They took him." Marcus, "Holy shit, dude. Did it work?" Leo, "Like a charm. Mom and Dad bought it completely. They look at him like he's a monster." Marcus, "Are you sure about this, man? This is serious. Like really serious." Leo, "It's more serious if we get caught for the Mustang. This way, nobody even looks at us. You just stick to the story. You were worried about me. He was weird. Got it?" Marcus, "Ick. What if he tells them about the car?" Leo, "He can say whatever he wants. Who are they gonna believe? Me, the straight-A student, or the creepy loser who lives in the basement? I told you this is the perfect plan. I even put a little scratch on my arm myself," said he grabbed me. "For added effect." My vision blurred. He even put a little scratch on my arm himself. The detail was so small, so sociopathic. He hadn't just lied. He had directed his own twisted play, with props and everything. Marcus, "This is messed up." Leo, "What's messed up is you almost getting us caught. Just be cool. In a week, he'll take a deal and this will all be over. We're clear. Just remember, you owe me." I looked up from the page, my heart pounding a sick, heavy rhythm. There it was, in black and white. Premeditated conspiracy. The blueprint for my destruction. It was cold, clinical, and absolutely evil. I wasn't a brother to him. I was just a problem to be solved. A piece to be sacrificed on his chessboard. Isabella was watching me. Her eyes filled with a mixture of pity and horror. "When I saw those," she whispered, "I knew. There was no doubt left." She told me what happened next. She had waited until their son, Liam, was asleep. She sat Leo down in their perfect living room, in their perfect house built on a foundation of lies, and she confronted him. She didn't yell. She just calmly slid the transcript of the text messages across the coffee table. She described how the color drained from his face, how he had tried to deny it, to stammer out excuses about it being a joke, a misunderstanding. But the words were there, cold, hard, and undeniable. He tried to turn it on her, to manipulate her. He accused her of trying to ruin their family, of believing a PI over her own fiancé. But she held firm. She had seen the way he manipulated their son. Now she was seeing the source of that darkness, in its purest form. Finally, cornered and exposed, he broke. He collapsed, sobbing. He confessed everything. The car, the crash, the plan. He admitted he had ruined my life to save his own. He begged her for forgiveness. He said he could fix it. He promised to make it right. But it was too late. The sun had finally been eclipsed. "I called my lawyer the next morning," Isabella said, her voice trembling slightly. "I started divorce proceedings, or, well, canceled the wedding and started custody filings. He can't be around our son. Not after this." She took a shaky breath. "The truth is out, Andrew. At least between us. Now we have to decide what to do with it." I looked down at the text messages one more time. After 10 years of darkness, someone had finally flipped on the light, and the cockroaches were scattering. The feeling wasn't joy. It wasn't satisfaction. It was a profound, earth-shattering validation. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't a monster. I was a victim, and now I had the proof. This was the moment that changed everything, when I finally got back the control over my own life. Thank you for staying with me this far. You're amazing. Please help me out by liking this video and commenting the number 1 down below, just so I know you've been on this journey with me. Not only does this help more people find this story, but it also lets me know that my experiences mean something to someone out there. Your support is the biggest motivation for me to continue sharing the rest of this journey. The legal system moves slowly, but with a confession and undeniable proof, even it has to move. Isabella's lawyer connected me with a pro bono innocence project. They took my case immediately. The wheels of justice, the same ones that had crushed me a decade ago, began to turn in the opposite direction. A judge reviewed the new evidence. The text messages, Marcus's sworn affidavit, Leo's videotaped confession, which his own lawyer had advised him to make as part of a deal to avoid further prosecution. The original case was a house of cards, and someone had just kicked out the bottom one. My conviction was vacated, expunged. The words sounded foreign, clinical. It meant that, legally, it never happened. My name was removed from the sex offender registry. After 10 years, I was no longer a monster in the eyes of the law. I walked out of the courthouse, and for the first time in my adult life, I wasn't looking over my shoulder. I wasn't afraid of a background check. I was just me. The fallout for Leo was swift and brutal. The university where he was a popular literature professor placed him on immediate leave, citing the morals clause in his contract. It was a quiet firing, but it was a firing nonetheless. A promising promotion he'd been up for vanished overnight. Isabella, true to her word, filed for full custody of their son, Liam, and with the evidence she had, Leo had no ground to stand on. The perfect life he had built was crumbling around him. The news spread through their small, suburban town like wildfire. The story was too juicy, too dark to ignore. The golden boy was a fraud. The perfect family was a sham. About a week after the exoneration, my phone rang. The caller ID said, "Mom." I hadn't seen that name on my screen in 10 years. I stared at it, my thumb hovering over the decline button. A decade of anger and resentment warred with a flicker of morbid curiosity. I answered. "Andrew." Her voice was hesitant, choked with tears. "Oh, Andrew, it's me." I said nothing. We heard what happened," she stammered. "Your father and I, we are so sorry. We had no idea. We made a terrible mistake." "Yes, you did?" I said, my voice flat and cold. There was none of the rage I thought I would feel. Just a vast, empty space where a son's love used to be. Could we see you?" she pleaded. "Please, we need to talk. We need to see you." I should have said no. I should have hung up and blocked her number and never looked back. But a part of me needed one last scene. One final conversation. I needed to look them in the eyes, not as their broken, discarded son, but as the man who had survived them. "Fine," I said. "The steakhouse on the interstate. Saturday. 7 o'clock. I named the most public, neutral place I could think of. Then I hung up before she could reply. The steakhouse was loud and crowded, exactly as I'd hoped. It was a fortress of normalcy. My parents were already there, tucked into a booth in the corner. They looked old, not just 10 years older, but worn down, brittle. The scandal had clearly taken its toll. My mother started crying the moment I sat down. My father just stared at me, his face a jumble of emotions I couldn't decipher. Guilt, shame, maybe even fear. We ordered in near silence. The small talk was excruciating. The weather, the traffic, anything to avoid the 10-ton elephant sitting in the booth with us. Finally, after the waiter left, my father cleared his throat. He pushed an envelope across the table. It was thick. "Andrew," he said, his voice heavy. It's not enough. We know that, but it's a start. It's $50,000. To help you get back on your feet. To try and make things right." I didn't touch the envelope. I just looked at it. $50,000. Was that the price of my life? The going rate for a decade of pain and humiliation? I slowly pulled out my phone. I had saved screenshots of the text messages. I turned the screen toward them. "I don't want your money," I said, my voice quiet but carrying over the restaurant's din. "I want you to understand." I started to read Leo's words out loud. They look at him like he's a monster. What are they gonna believe? Me, the straight-A student, or the creepy loser who lives in the basement? I even put a little scratch on my arm myself, for added effect. My mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. My father flinched as if I'd struck him. He wasn't a scared kid, Mom, I said, looking directly at her. He was a co-conspirator in his own lie. He was meticulous. And you too. You were his willing accomplices. We didn't know, she sobbed. He was just a child. He was our son. The words snapped something inside me. And what was I? I shot back, my voice dangerously low. I was 19, barely an adult myself. Where was my protection? Where was my benefit of the doubt? You didn't even hesitate. You threw me to the wolves to protect your perfect son and your perfect family name. I pulled up the sleeve of my left shirt, just enough to show the faint, silvery line on my wrist from that night in my car. A scar they had never seen. A pain they had never known. This, I said quietly, this is what your mistake cost. My mother saw it. Her face went ashen. She made a choking sound, stood up abruptly, and stumbled toward the restroom. My father just sat there, his face buried in his hands. For the first time in my life, I saw my father, Robert Miller, the man of stone, completely and utterly broken. The power dynamic in our family had just shifted. Forever. I left them in the restaurant. I didn't take the envelope. I didn't say goodbye. I just walked out into the cool night air and drove away, feeling nothing but the strange, clean emptiness of a final ending. A few days later, my curiosity got the better of me. That $50,000. It seemed like such a specific, large amount for my parents to have on hand. My father was a comfortable middle manager, not a millionaire. It felt off. My exoneration came with a small team of legal aides who were helping me tie up loose ends. I called one of them, a young, sharp paralegal named Maria. I asked her a hypothetical question. When someone is exonerated after a wrongful conviction, is there ever any kind of compensation from the state? Absolutely, she said immediately. It depends on the state, but there's almost always a restitution fund for victims of wrongful incarceration or coerced pleas. Based on your case, you'd likely be entitled to a significant sum. Why do you ask? My blood ran cold. Can you check if a claim has been filed or paid out in my name? She called me back an hour later. Her voice was tight with anger. Andrew, she said, the state approved your compensation payment 2 weeks ago. A check for $50,000 was mailed out. Since your address on file was from 10 years ago, it was sent to your parents' home. The breath left my body in a rush. It wasn't their money. It was my money. The money the state was giving me for the life they had helped take. And they had tried to pass it off as their own grand gesture of reconciliation. They weren't trying to apologize. They were trying to buy my forgiveness with my own damn money. It was a final, desperate act of manipulation from a family that knew nothing else. That was the moment I realized that their talk of protecting the inheritance or the family name was just a cover. This was about control. It had always been about control. This last betrayal was different from the first. The first one had destroyed me. This one liberated me. It severed the last, threadbare cord of familial obligation I might have felt. They weren't just flawed, mistaken people. They were rotten to the core. There was nothing left to salvage. There was no relationship to mourn. It was like I was finally witnessing the funeral of the family I thought I had, and I felt nothing but relief. I called a courier service. I had them pick up the check from my lawyer, who had already intervened to get it from my parents, and deliver it to their house. Tucked into the envelope, I included a simple, handwritten note. I don't need your money. I don't need anything from you, ever again. That night, for the first time in 10 years, I slept without nightmares. The ghosts were gone. They hadn't been exorcised by forgiveness or understanding. They had been banished by the cold, hard, and wonderfully liberating truth. I was finally, completely, free of them. 1 year can change everything. The city I had lived in held too many ghosts, too many streets that reminded me of sleeping in my car, too many faces that looked at me with pity. With the real compensation money, which turned out to be significantly more than the initial check, I made a clean break. I moved 3 states away, to a sunny, mid-sized city by the coast where nobody knew my name. The first thing I did was find Mr. Chun. I flew him out, put him up in a nice hotel, and made him an offer. I wanted to buy his old shop's name and legacy. He tried to refuse, but I insisted. He had saved my life, and this was the only way I knew how to honor him. I found a perfect storefront downtown and opened Phoenix Electronics. The name felt right, rising from the ashes and all that. It was bigger than Mr. Chen's old place, cleaner, more modern, but it had the same heart. A place where broken things could be made whole again. The business took off. My reputation for being able to fix anything, especially vintage audio gear, spread quickly among collectors and musicians. For the first time in my life, I was not just surviving, I was thriving. I was known not for my past, but for my skill. Not as a monster, but as a craftsman. I started to let people in. I joined a hiking club. I started dating a woman named Clara, a kind-hearted landscape architect who loved my quiet nature. When I told her my story, she didn't flinch. She just took my hand and said, "I'm so sorry that happened to you. But that's not who you are." Simple as that. She saw me. Life was good. It was calm. One afternoon, a letter arrived at the shop. It had no return address, but I recognized Isabella's elegant handwriting. My heart did a little jump, a residual echo of the old anxiety. But I wasn't afraid anymore. Inside was not a letter, but a photograph. It was a picture of a little boy, about 6 years old, with bright, curious eyes and a mop of dark hair. He was sitting at a small workbench, a toy robot in pieces in front of him, a tiny screwdriver in his hand. He was smiling, a look of intense concentration on his face. "Liam." I turned the photo over. On the back, Isabella had written a short note. "Andrew, he's a lot like you. He loves taking things apart to see how they work. I tell him all about his uncle, the genius who can fix anything. I told him you are a strong, kind man who went through something terrible and came out the other side. He's proud of you. I am too. Thank you for giving us the truth. Isabella." I stared at the picture for a long time. This little boy, my nephew, would grow up knowing a different story. He would know the truth. The cycle of lies and manipulation was broken. My suffering had not been for nothing. It had paved the way for something better for the next generation. A future built on truth, not secrets. A genuine, unforced smile spread across my face. I taped the picture to the wall above my workbench, right next to a photo of Mr. Chan and me on the day we opened the new shop. My past and my future. My real family. It's funny how life works out. I spent so many years defined by a single catastrophic event. My life was divided into 2 parts, before the lie and after. But now, standing here in my own shop, the air smelling of solder and opportunity, it feels different. I'm not just the after. I'm something new entirely. The shop is doing well. I've even hired a couple of young techs, kids who are hungry to learn. I see the same fire in their eyes that I had in that basement all those years ago. But I make sure they know their work has value. I make sure they feel seen. I don't think about my biological family much anymore. They're not a source of anger or pain. They're just gone. They've become irrelevant to my story. The final chapter belonged to me, not them. About 6 months ago, I got one last letter. This one was from Leo. It was a long, rambling apology, full of words like remorse and atonement. He wrote about how he was in therapy, how he was trying to understand the darkness inside him. He said he didn't expect me to forgive him, but he hoped that one day I could. I read the whole thing standing by the trash can in my kitchen, and when I was done, I just let it drop. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel pity. I felt absolutely nothing. Forgiving him felt like a chore, and honestly, he didn't deserve to take up any more of my time, not even in my thoughts. His apology wasn't for me. It was for him, a way to make himself feel better. I wasn't interested in being a part of his healing journey. I was too busy living my own. Sometimes a customer will bring in a device that seems hopelessly broken. They'll say, "I think it's a lost cause. Maybe I should just throw it away." And I always smile and take it from them. "Let's plug it in," I'll say. "Let's see if there's still a light on inside." Because I've learned that you can't judge the whole machine by its battered casing. I've learned that even after the worst short circuit, After the power has been cut for a very long time, there's always a chance you can fix what's broken. Sometimes you just have to rebuild it yourself, piece by piece. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I know it was a long one, but it means the world to me that you stuck around to the end. I hope this story reached you in some way. Have you ever had a moment that completely changed the course of your life? I'd be honored if you'd share your thoughts in the comments below. And please, don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next.